Hi everyone, this is Jacob and it's finally Friday. Last week we went over all the different types of interferences we deal with on our wireless network. Today we're going to look at how we can minimize interference on our network through our channel plans. So on 2.4 it is important that you're using only 1, 6, and 11 to avoid that ACI, that adjacent channel interference. Those are the only three channels that are non-overlapping, and we will go recap that once again here in a second. Something that I also try to point out is to use the 2.4 spectrum as your secondary or best effort network. It doesn't mean that the network won't be good or usable, but it does mean for your Chromebooks or those devices that are most important to you, push them over onto the 5 gig network, and maybe your guest network or your BYOD network allow them to only use 2.4. This really frees up that 5 gig network to support your most important devices. In 2.4, it's good to always use 20 megahertz wide channels. Ultimately, there's not enough spectrum within 2.4 to get wider channels out of that and still have a usable network with any kind of capacity. It's best practice to disable half to 2/3 of your radios, especially in a education environment if you have an AP per classroom. This will actually increase the capacity of your network. And I'll show you some slides here in a second of that as well. For channel coverage, we need to shoot for -70 dBm in the classrooms and -75 dBm in our hallways. This will allow you to have good coverage, and also this will allow you to reduce your interferences. And I would like to stress how important it is that you get a survey done whenever you're putting in APs, whether it's Extreme APs or a third-party vendor. Get a survey done, make sure the APs are going where they need to go, and make sure all the settings are set appropriately, power settings and so forth, because you can have the best technology and it will still run slow because of a poor channel plan. Channel plan is very key whenever you're trying to get capacity out of a network and raise your user experience. Avoiding all interference on 2.4 is very unlikely whenever roaming is required. Anytime you're looking to roam between APs, you need some significant channel overlap in order to make those roams seamless. And it's hard to not have interference when you're trying to push for that. Once again, this is a picture of the 11 channels that we have in the United States. Ultimately, it shows all 14, but we can only use 11. And you can see once again that 1, 6, and 11 are the only 3 non-overlapping channels that you can use. So this is a mock-up of a school that I put together in Ekahau, which once again is our modeling software for our APs. And you can see that they have a AP per classroom scenario, and you can see the gray is a substantial amount of channel overlap. We have multiple APs on the same channel in 2.4. This time I set the legend to best practice, so 3 APs in a given location is yellow. Anything over that turns gray. So you see you have a lot of gray on the map. If I turn half those APs off, you get a coverage map like this. You can see that everywhere we need coverage, we have usable coverage. The only grayed out areas would be the top center of the map. But you see overall we have good coverage in our 2.4 environment. If I go to the next screen, this is the new channel overlap with half of the radios off. You see we only have a little bit of yellow. There's no gray whatsoever. So we've really cleaned up this environment, and ultimately this environment will have more capacity than the previous environment because there's less competition for that airtime. So once again, just proving it is very important that you have a good channel plan if you're looking to increase your user experience. On 5 gig, things are a little bit different. I would suggest that you use 5 gig for your primary network, those devices that you find are most critical on your network. use 5 gig for those. It is the cleaner of the two bands, and most of the time, user experience will be better on 5 gig. Use 20 megahertz channels by default. 40 megahertz are okay as long as you can avoid your interference. And this depends on the building, because ultimately walls are our friends. So if we have really thick walls or walls that cause a lot of loss, you may be able to get away with 40 megahertz wide channels. This is because you're able to really control where that signal is. It's best practice to use DFS channels when possible, and I'll go over that in just a second, what DFS means on the next slide. Be careful of your multi-floor channel plan. I went to a school the other week where the individual floor plan looked very good. There was not much interference on an individual floor basis, but whenever you add in the floor above, that's where they misconfigured their channel plan a little bit. They had a lot of channel overlap coming down from the floor above. We had to change up their channel plan in order to gain them some capacity and alleviate some of the issues they were having with roaming and user experience. The channel coverage actually goes up. We can increase our channel coverage on 5 gig for a couple of reasons. One, it doesn't travel as far, and two, we just have more channels. So we can go up to neg 65 in the classrooms and neg 70 in the hallways. Once again, it's important that you get this tested. If you're going to spend a lot of money on your APs, make sure you're getting a survey done in order to know you are using the APs to their max capabilities. Another quick tip is don't use 40 megahertz wide channels if you're not going to use DFS channels. And you can see that in this next slide here. The channels in the green are non-DFS channels. And you can see that we have 9 20 megahertz non-DFS channels. We only have 4 that are 40 megahertz wide non-DFS channels, and 2 80 megahertz wide non-DFS channels. The channels in the red were proposed but are not yet available, and it looks like we're not going to get those channels actually. That proposal has been declined. And the channels in the blue and yellow are DFS channels. These are channels that are used for radio location and terminal Doppler radar. The yellow is terminal Doppler radar and the blue is radio location. If our APs hear either terminal Doppler radar or radio location on the channel they are on, they have to move off that channel and cannot come back for at least 30 minutes. So they will hop to a different channel. So this can obviously cause a problem if you're around airports or weather radar of any sort, because it'll cause your channels to switch on you. A lot of people will eliminate this by not using DFS channels at all, but you can see you're cutting out the majority of your channels if you do this. A lot of times you can still use many of the channels even if you're having some radar events on a certain channel. With Extreme, we have alarms that can tell you if APs are switching channels, so you can be made aware of that and you can eliminate that channel from your channel plan if necessary. But you can see if you're using 40 megahertz wide channels, if you're not using DFS, you're limited to 4 and you're really cutting out your capacity on the 5 gig spectrum. If you add DFS in, you get a total of 12 channels, which is much more usable. So definitely keep that in mind. But that's it for this Filing Friday. I appreciate your time. Thank you for joining me, and I will catch you next week with more tips on how to reduce your interference in your wireless network. Have a great Friday.